David Soren stood at the edge of a stage built on the bones of his own ambition. The auditorium pulsed with applause, thousands of people rising to their feet, chanting his name like a prophet. He delivered his 107th keynote of the year. Another city, another stadium, another crowd desperate to believe they could win, just like he had. He was a god in a suit, trimmed beard, timeless smile, TED Talk poise, and he wore his perfection like armor. No one saw the crack until it split open. His hand trembled, nearly invisible behind the sleek microphone. He gripped it tighter. His smile stayed fixed. But his vision swam, the air thickened. And then it buzzed. His phone. One buzz. Two. Urgent. He glanced at the screen resting on the monitor just off stage. Unknown number. Then, emergency. Your daughter, Evelyn Soren, attempted suicide. Condition, critical. UCLA Medical. Time bent. The crowd faded into static. The stage lights flickered. David's heart didn't pound. It stopped. For 5 seconds, he stood there frozen. Then he dropped the mic. It wasn't a dramatic slam. It simply slipped. The silence that followed wasn't respectful. It was confused. The world's most polished motivator turned, walked 3 steps backward, and vomited into the darkness behind the curtain. No one saw him leave the building. No public statement, no Instagram post, no flight announcement. He vanished like a man who had never existed, leaving behind a PR team in chaos, a fan base in shock, and a daughter in a hospital bed. 2 days later, David Soren stepped off a third-class train in a nameless seaside town, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low. His suitcase dragged behind him like a casket. His phone was off. The notification still sat there, unread, like a time bomb in his pocket. He didn't go to the hospital. He couldn't. Not yet. He checked into a weather-beaten guest house near the cliffs and said his name was Michael Dean. The woman at the desk barely looked up. Tourists weren't rare here, but they never stayed long. The air smelled of salt and rust. The wind howled like something ancient. And perched on the edge of the world stood a lighthouse, faded red, bones white with age. Its light hadn't shone in years. That night, he sat on the sand watching waves eat the shoreline. Guilt clung to him like damp clothes. He thought of Evelyn's face, 9 years old, eyes like his, mouth full of questions. He had missed her birthdays, all of them. He told himself he was building a legacy. He had built a wall. On the second morning, he met the old man, the keeper of the lighthouse. Bent back, gray beard, hands like cracked stone. The man didn't ask who David was, didn't recognize him, or pretended not to. He just nodded and said, "Storm's coming. Sea always speaks first." David replied, "I don't speak sea." "The eye." Old man shrugged. "Then maybe that's why you keep drowning." They didn't talk again that day, but something stirred in David's chest, like a key turning in a long-locked door. And for the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. That night, David had a dream. He was on stage speaking, but no one applauded. In the front row sat his daughter. She was 7, and as he spoke, blood ran from her ears. She whispered, "Why didn't you hear me?" And he woke up screaming into the sea. He opened his eyes to the sound of waves smashing against the cliff, salt in the air like a memory refusing to fade. His heart was still sprinting from the dream. Evelyn, red dress, blood, silence. He hadn't seen her in 2 years. Work, always work. A million speeches about success and not one conversation that mattered. The lighthouse loomed above like a cathedral of forgotten warnings. He walked up the winding path, rain lashing his face, hoping the old man might have something, anything, to distract him from the inside of his own skull. But the old man was waiting for him with an old clock in his lap. "Sit," he said without looking up. "Tell me." "Do you believe time forgives?" He frowned. "What?" The old man turned the clock around. It was cracked. One of the hands was missing. "This clock stopped ticking at 3:17 p.m. 40 years ago." "Why keep it?" he asked. "Because it reminds me of the moment I lost my son." The man's breath caught. "I was in the middle of fixing the lighthouse wiring. My boy had been sick all morning. I heard him call out, but I told him I'd come in 5 minutes. He died at 3:17. The man stared at the clock. Its silence filled the space between them like a scream. "I kept chasing purpose after that," the old man continued. "Built things, saved lives with this light. But it never fixed the one I lost." Something cracked inside the man, soft but deep. He looked away. "You think your daughter needs your success?" the old man said. "She needed your shadow in her room, your breath down the hallway, your voice when the darkness grew teeth." The man wiped his face. Rain or tears, he couldn't tell anymore. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Because you're not too late. She's alive. That means you still have time, even if it feels broken." He stood, suddenly needing to move, to think. But his legs were weak. He collapsed onto the porch step, burying his head in his hands. "I don't know how to be her father," he whispered. "You don't have to know," the old man replied. "You just have to show up, again, and again, and again." He nodded slowly. Something in him, perhaps the last piece of denial, was finally drowning in the sea air. And then the old man pulled something from his coat pocket, a small, rusted compass. "It points to the heart when the mind gets lost," he said with a grin. "Follow it." The man hesitated, then took it. The compass needle wobbled before locking in one direction, away from the sea, back toward the world he'd run from. He stood again, this time steadier. "Thank you," he said, looking the old man in the eye. But the old man just chuckled. "Don't thank me. I'm just an echo in your story." As the man walked back down the cliff path, the compass clutched tightly in his hand. He didn't yet know how to fix things. But for the first time in years, he was walking towards something that mattered. Even if it terrified him, even if he might fail, because time might be broken, but it still moves forward when the heart decides to. The real countdown doesn't start with the clock. It starts when you choose to turn around. He drove like a man who had nothing left to chase, yet everything left to find. The rain had faded, but the road remained slick, a mirror to the chaos inside him. He didn't turn the radio on. Silence was louder than anything now. The compass lay on the passenger seat, its needle trembling slightly, as though it too was unsure of the direction they were headed. His phone had no signal, no notifications, just a frozen black screen reflecting his tired eyes. His daughter, Anna, would be 20 this year. He hadn't seen her since she was 16. 4 years of missed birthdays, unopened messages, and guilt swept under schedules. He once wrote her a letter and never mailed it, bought her a gift and never wrapped it. Thought of her every night but never had the courage to say her name out loud. That night, he remembered it with cruel clarity, when she asked him through tears if she mattered more than his deadlines. He chose silence then, and silence answered everything. He whispered her name now, just once, like a prayer into the cracked windshield. Anna. The road narrowed through a tunnel. Brief darkness, then light again. He was not the same man who had entered. He passed his old neighborhood. Each house a ghost, a porch where she once played with chalk, a fence she scraped her knee against, the tree she named Whisper and swore it listened to her stories. Now it just looked like any other tree, but it wasn't. He parked a block away. His feet dragged, his breath shallow, and then he saw her, Anna. She was sitting on the front steps of a modest house, curled up in a grey hoodie, sipping something warm. Headphones in, a backpack beside her. The same stubborn braid she always wore as a child, now longer, neater, older. She didn't see him at first, and maybe, he thought, that was mercy. Because what does a ghost say when it returns to the living? He nearly turned back. The old self screamed inside him, "Don't embarrass yourself, you'll only make it worse. She's fine without you." But then the compass needle spun and pointed forward. He walked, step by step, with the shame of every wrong choice clinging to his clothes like fog. His hands trembled. The memory of her voice calling "Daddy" from years ago ached in his spine. And then she looked up, eyes locked. Time held its breath. She took off her headphones, slowly, eyes scanning him as if unsure whether he was real or just another memory in disguise. He managed a broken smile. I didn't know if you'd still be here." Her lips parted, her brows lifted, but she didn't speak. He stepped closer, then hesitated. "I came to tell you something," he said, voice cracking. "Not to fix the past. I know I can't. I just wanted to say..." His breath caught. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry. You deserved a father who showed up. I didn't. That's on me." Tears blurred his sight, but he didn't look away. "If you never forgive me, I'll understand. But you should know, there hasn't been a day I didn't think of you." Silence stretched like winter, and then, with the softness of someone letting go of years of weight, Anna stood. She looked at him, not as a stranger or a ghost, but as someone who finally arrived. She didn't say much. Just one line. "You're late." A pause. "But I'm glad you came." They didn't hug like the movies, no swelling music or dramatic embrace. They just sat, side by side, on the step, the way they used to. The sky opened above them, and the wind was kinder now. Somewhere in the distance, a bird began to sing. The compass sat quietly in his pocket, not because it had no direction, but because he no longer needed it. "Time doesn't heal everything," she said softly, "but it shows you what's worth healing." They sat there for hours, side by side, no words at first, just the night and the crickets and the quiet hum of forgiveness waiting for its turn to speak. David kept glancing at her. Anna had his eyes. But they held something else now, years he missed, birthdays he wasn't there for, a strength that didn't come from him. "I brought something," he finally said, voice nearly broken from too much silence. She looked over. "What?" He pulled out the compass. "I've had this since the day I left. Thought it would lead me somewhere right, but it kept pointing back here." She stared at it like it was a fossil from a life that had crumbled. "I don't want it," she whispered. He nodded. "I don't either." And with trembling hands, he placed it on the wooden step between them, a symbol now neutralized. The compass wasn't for finding the path. It was for showing him where he'd been lost. They talked. Hours bled into early morning. There were no Hollywood lines, no sweeping orchestras. Just a father who didn't know how to be one, and a daughter who had learned to mother herself. David admitted everything. His cowardice, his fear of failing her. "I thought I had to be perfect to come back." She smiled, just faintly. "And I thought I had to be broken forever because you left." Their truths met in the middle, on the bridge of hours where healing walks barefoot and slow. She told him about her music. "I busk on Saturdays," she said, half laughing. "You once said I had no rhythm." "I was wrong," he said, "about everything." She looked at him, studying him the way children study strangers who say they're family. "You're not who you were," she said. "But I think that's the point. The sky began to blush. David stood and walked a few feet ahead. He turned and asked, "Why didn't you slam the door?" Anna paused. "Because I kept hearing your voice in one of my dreams. Just once." "What did I say?" She looked up at the sky, eyes glistening. "You said, 'I got lost, but I never stopped loving you.'" David crumbled. He sat back down, not beside her, but below the steps, like a man who knows he has to earn his way back up. She didn't stop him. She let the silence stretch again. But this time, it wasn't emptiness, it was permission. Just before he left, she said, "I don't know what this means, but I'm not ready to close the door again. Not yet." He nodded, fighting the instinct to ask for more. "Then I'll keep showing up," he said. "That's all I ever wanted." Back at his car, David sat motionless for a long time. The compass still sat on her porch step. He didn't take it. It wasn't his anymore. He had something better, a direction that didn't need to be pointed, only lived. On the rearview mirror, he noticed a post-it note. Faded. Old. Written years ago by his younger self. "Be better than your father." He took it down, crumpled it. Not because he failed, but because he now understood. The real lesson wasn't being better than someone. It was being there for someone. As he drove away, the sky opened, sunlight streaming like redemption. He didn't know if she'd call him tomorrow, but for the first time in years, he didn't need to know. He had crossed the bridge. David drove in silence. The town faded in his rearview mirror, like a page he'd finally stopped rereading. The morning sun warmed his cheek through the glass, and yet he felt cold inside. An ache that wasn't pain, but space, room. He hadn't touched the compass since leaving the porch. It sat on the passenger seat, glinting faintly as the car turned. For years, it had symbolized something to him: legacy, honor, clarity. But now he knew. It had never guided him. It only pointed away from his truth. That truth sat on a wooden step, playing guitar, refusing his shortcuts and waiting for no one. His daughter had survived him, not in memory, but in spite. As the miles passed, David found himself reaching for something else, his phone. It buzzed softly. A message. From Anna. "I didn't mean forever. I meant for now. Heal. Write me when you're ready." He stared at it until the screen dimmed, then lit up again. A moment of something so rare it frightened him. Hope. Not the naive kind. The kind that knows how hard everything is, and still chooses to believe. David pulled into a rest stop just outside the city. The lot was empty except for a rusted vending machine and a long bench shaded by an old oak. He stepped out and stood by the trunk. He opened it slowly. Inside were 3 boxes: old manuscripts, unedited drafts, and rejection letters from a life he'd once chased and then abandoned. A single envelope rested atop them. It was from Elijah. He had never opened it. With trembling fingers, he tore it open and read, "David, I knew you'd stop listening. I knew you'd get lost in maps you didn't make. That's what men like us do. But here's what you need to know. Legacy is not what you leave behind. It's what you learn to carry. You always thought the compass was mine, but it was yours the moment you realized it was broken. Burn the map. Start walking. E. David." Laughed. Softly, then loudly, then brokenly. It was all absurd, and it was all true. He gathered the papers from the boxes, including Elijah's letter, and placed them in a steel bin beside the rest stop. He struck a match. As the flames took hold, he tossed the compass in last. It hissed against the fire like a serpent losing its tongue. He watched the past burn, not with rage, but release. He didn't need a map anymore. He needed movement. David walked back to the car. He sat in the driver's seat and looked at his hands. They didn't shake. He grabbed the steering wheel with quiet conviction. Cut to 1 week later. A different town. A coffee shop humming with quiet life. A small laptop open on a corner table. David sits, typing. He didn't write about success. He didn't write about ambition. He wrote about mistakes. He wrote about shame. And somehow, he wrote his way into becoming a father again. David clicks send on an email titled, "To my daughter, not an apology, a beginning." He smiles. Not the smile of someone who's healed, but someone who finally knows healing is not the goal. Showing up is. If this story touched something in you, don't just scroll away. Leave a comment below. Tell us your turning point or the lesson life taught you when you least expected it. And if you felt this, really felt it, hit like and subscribe. Because the next story might be the one that changes everything.